And so I went ahead and reversed the heat signature in the workstation after on the footage. So what we get is a good view of how these things actually pop up to take a look. And you can see right there, he kind of pops up. And this is going to be the creature right here. You can see this is going to be the top of the head and then part of the shoulders. But he's in those bushes and he just wants to take a quick look. So he pops up and then he goes back down. And if you watch, you can see him do it. Boom, and then he goes back down. This is the kind of behavior that they're doing, but if you let this play in real time, he does that so fast, you'd never notice it. In real time, it's like this. You can't even tell that the guy's there, man, basically. But you can see he rises up and takes a look at me. Now, I'm spinning the camera. I've got all kinds of hot bush here. We're basically looking out over the prairie and then in the saw palmettos and in the weeds and in the ground brush that's approximately 4.5 to 6 feet tall. This individual is out there in that prairie and he's coming up to take a look, and you can plainly see him come up. Look at that. Boom. And you can even see the hairs on this thing's head. There he is, coming up, take a look at me when I'm trying to catch him on thermal. Whoop. Welcome to the Bigfoot Researcher's Journal. Finding the habitat is exactly what it sounds like. You go in and find habitat. And the way that we do that is cautiously. I'm observing everything around me to not get bitten by water moccasins or any other venomous snakes, as this particular habitat is protected. And the only thing that's going to relieve the area of venomous snakes are the residents themselves, right? There's no hunting allowed. There's nobody back in here. You're only allowed to hike, and you're supposed to leave it the way you found it. This is where we find these creatures. This is where we've been finding all of the tracks. These are the fringes of development, the buffer zones. So typically once we find a place, immediately we'll get sign. Tracks moving off like this right here. This is where we'll be researching tonight. So there's no way around it. You have to be there with them at night, and it takes a certain amount of willpower once you understand what's going on around you to actually know what you're going to do, intentionally charge your cameras, and then go there and do it, because they're there. Jesus. So when the creatures are covered up and hanging out together, and only certain ones register, and then only certain parts of their body that aren't covered in hair actually show a heat signature, it can be tough to locate the creatures. That's why it's so important to review the film, because the topography doesn't change. The creatures are going to be in those favorite spots when you show up. We recreate these situations dozens of times every couple of months, so they're used to us doing a certain thing. When they see that it's us and we're doing that certain thing, they come in. They know I'm not going to charge out there, try to bum rush on them or anything, and it gives them an opportunity to learn about us while we learn about them. That's the beauty of knowing where the creatures live. It's automatic. They're going to observe you. You just have to take the time to do the experiments repeatedly to encourage the behavior. Look, we're going to be here. We're going to be here all the time. And when we're here, we're not going to mess with you. In fact, we got some cool stuff going on. Come take a look. And then you pull out your gear and start filming. This is more about what we've found, is that it's more about people don't understand what the creatures look like, what their physiology allows them to be capable of, and so they don't even recognize that all that uncomfortability they're feeling at night and those little small noises are actually giant feet moving very sneakily through the bush towards them. Had they understood these things, had they understood that the Sasquatch can regulate its temperature, that is to say that we could pick up some that glow and some that don't, and you really got to look for the ones that don't. Had researchers known that decades ago, we'd be in a very different position right now with our understanding about this at a national scale. They're real, period. You catch them on thermal. Some of them you don't, but you better learn what they look like if you're going to be in the bushes with them, because they can get right up on you. Our techniques are very simple, and they rely on our understandings that we've gained about the creatures and their curious natures about what modern humans do while they're in their environments. We set in, put our chairs out, and start making noises. If the creatures are in the area, they have a tendency to respond. Now, I've reversed the thermal signature on this so that we could better detect that there was an individual present. Let's take a look. So this is, again, just a closer look at, how this creature is moving. And you can see he's moving back and forth in there. He comes out, takes a look at me, and then pulls back. And we can see the eye in this area here. It's possible there's a couple of them, but they're obviously, if there is more than one, huddled together. You can see him. He's peeking in there and looking at me. Boom, then he goes back in. So what really is going on in this footage is we're camped out, essentially sitting in our truck in some lawn chairs, and we're looking out over the areas that are approachable, that we can film, that have lower lying brush. And after a few hours, one of them comes up, takes a peek, and reveals himself. And you can plainly see that's what's going on. There's a couple of these creatures. We're identifying some of this symmetry that's associated with their bone structures. And just looking at the footage, it's absolutely incredible that we caught this on film, and a testament to our abilities in these environments when we're there to pay attention and use the gear that we brought for what it's needed for, when the time is right and when we're supposed to use it. These are situations that are very difficult to duplicate, and when you have an opportunity to completely document it, that's what you should be about. These are the types of situations where we're learning about creatures and we're able to transmit this information to others. If you can do these kind of things, then you should be doing this. The fact that we've gone so long purchasing tens of thousands of thermal cameras that essentially won't do the job, and literally, if you look at the design, it seems intentional, the elimination of these creatures from thermal softwares. So this is the kind of footage that we hundreds of times have used to understand how the creatures observe us. We're looking at a tree right here, and of course, with the thermal scopes, you're always going to get this reticle, and we try to move that out of the way, but this was early on when I first got this particular thermal. This is actually courtesy of Scott Hunley. This particular ATN that I'm using right now was a 460 resolution. This is approximately 35 feet from me, and there's a large individual, and he's going to move, and all we're doing is identifying that something's there and it's moving. You see that? It moves to its right. It moves to our left. You can see it. Boom, boom. This is what lets me know that the noises that I heard during the expedition while I was shooting this clip was actually one of the creatures. Deer will not come up and approach your position at night unless there's some kind of a trauma situation going on, where we've literally had them. Look, you can see them moving in there. We've literally had, and you can also identify that the heat signature is very low. The outside plants have a greater heat signature, right? And then all of a sudden, boom, we get like just a tiny bit of heat signature right here on whatever it is back there. Obviously, as we walk closer to it, we're going to want to know, right? And I'm seeing that there's some heat back in here. This is the creatures. There's a couple of small ones, and they're hanging out together. We've already identified that, and we're going to be going over that. But I wanted to show you, because this is how subtle it literally comes down to. What we have are very sneaky creatures, and they're moving Very slow. Look at that. Barely even tell. Now me, I'm picking up on it, so I start walking over there. Let's take a look. Let me trim this, stretch this out, and I'll take the crop off, and we'll take a look at this and see what happens. Now you can see the things moving back there. And I'll pull this spot off of here, and we'll watch this clip just to see what happens. If we identify anything that looks like, oh, wait. See, right in that spot, let me get rid of this. Right in that spot right there, we're starting to see other heat. So is there multiple creatures in that? And then we've got this over in this area, right? And this is one of those things where the whole creature, like we know, isn't going to show heat signature. The bone structure of the face is without hair. So we're looking in this corner and we're trying to see what goes on here, if there's any further movement, because we know we're getting observed right now. So we're walking over towards it to see if we can force movement. And it's one of those things where, look at this. I mean, we got this like spook looking weird thing here. And then there's stuff on the sides here too. So we got the group, and we can see this big black shape coming up in the back here. Now, all of this led me to look at other pieces of the footage. Boy, these guys really like popping up. Look at this. Boom. Just for a second. He just wants to take a little quick look. And then he goes back down. And he does it several times. I'm approaching, and he keeps popping up, trying to take looks at me as I come up. And you can see it. Whoa. Look at that. This is him popping out of the bushes, taking looks at me. That's nuts. The whole way is blocked and overgrown, and you will take considerable time getting through there. So we're gonna stand back here and watch what happens.
A diamond village.
Careful. Where you're walking is snake territory for sure.
I can make it through there, but where do you go from there?
That's what I'm saying. We can make it to the edge, but it's just more dark.
God, look at the fucking size of that tree that's dead, though. It's huge.
I know.
Another huge dead tree.
This big one right out here.
Mel's like, I gotta get over there. I'm going.
Are you making fun of me, Ben?
No, I like to take my...
Go on, Granny, get that shot. Oops. So I guess, there are quite a few things that we can understand now about these creatures from looking at our work. And I correlate everything that's going on throughout, the weeks as the month of research goes on. And, how does it pertain to this? How does it pertain to that? What does this mean? What does that mean? And, when you have overwhelmingly large amounts of data in certain areas, you can't ignore all that, you know what I mean? And I'm just saying areas of what the data can encompass, you know what I mean? So I'm looking at these things, and they're kind of frightening, It's it seems that my mentor and his hypothesis on hominoids in the lecture series, Everything You Know Is Wrong, Lloyd Pye, is pretty close to on the money based on what we found. Lloyd said that we managed to push their kind back into these forests, and that in those fringe areas is where we see them. So I said, okay. And we looked at our development, in South Florida, and found those fringe areas. And it's strange because as you begin to do your research, you see a lot of it is off limits, first of all, especially in certain regions. You start going through Broward, and you start running into this west of 441 where you're not allowed back in there. Some of it's privately owned, and a lot of it is just inaccessible because of the blockage of development to get to it. So you'd have to go through places and you just can't do it. You gotta get permission to go through the properties and do all this crap, which really doesn't, lend to the situation being successful from the get-go. What you need are natural environments, and so we moved to where we found those buffer zones that were pre-set up. And it's interesting because I grew up here, so I participated in putting some of the areas in fencing. And so these areas were predetermined to, and they're calling them preserves, which if you just look at the terminology, it's a preserve. You know, what are they preserving in their wildlife, the ecology, all of these things, I'm sure. But the main thing is to keep enough habitat so that these things can stay off people's radar. This is the buffer zone. The skirmishes happened here, and it's not the same, you know. Our war with the hominoids at this point has no more weapons involved in it unless there are these extreme circumstances where the creatures can be identified by the general public and they have to be put down and people are silenced. And this is all fact. Cryptozoologists have been covering this side of the equation for decades, and it was a big part of my research. Scientific suppression as well, through attitudes, scientific attitudes. Well, I'm sorry, but you know, it's like demonstrating publicly a bias that prevents people from even moving in a direction the general public clearly wants is unethical, especially when we know hominoids existed. Science, as we know it, archaeology in particular, but anthropology as well, has determined that these ancient cultures and these ancient hominoids existed, and some of them, more advanced, had primitive culture. So we look at these things and we see this in our research, all of it. All of Lloyd Pye's lecture, where we took the niche zones and developed them, and then created buffer zones by dumping semi amounts of soil in these areas to feather out these buffer zones, right? So it's not just boom, and then it's never like that. Not where the creatures are at. It's one of the tells, and that's where we find them. So the BFRO agrees with us in its Florida dispositions as far as, like, you know, where the reports are concerned. Early stuff, man, is a lot of what's on there. But the stuff from 90s up, it's insane. And you can see where it is, and you can see what's going on if you look at that time period in that area. The turnpike kidnapping almost happened up there on the turnpike with the semi-tractor trailer guy. That's the period of like 70 to 90 where immediate stuff that was real big was put in like obvious areas where these creatures were, and they were just ignored because they were sighted crossing roads and doing all kinds of things back then. I-75 was a big one. There was a rest stop there. Tractor trailer guy pulls into the rest stop and he's got his rig running. He's like resting, and this thing opens the door of his cab and tries to kidnap him out of it. It's on the BFR. I couldn't believe that when I was like, damn. So that's pretty blatant. But as long as you're quiet about it and you don't make a big deal about it, in 15 months back then, it was just a story, and it may or may not have been true in the public's mind. And that's what happens when you put a lid on something. It may or may not be true in the public's mind. And so we have this where our neighbors unfortunately agreed to go along with this. And I think a lot of it was unwittingly. I think they were just like told, like, there's something out there. We know there's something out there. Don't talk about it. The public will go fucking crazy. And it's real simple stuff, typically. Where research is concerned, what we found is there's an issue. And the issue is going to be over food and water. And there'll be a migratory process, and we expect this. So we'll be documenting this as things worsen. And the first thing to go will be the aquifer. When the aquifer goes, the small game will go. When the small game goes, these guys are gone, if not at the same time as the small game, and everybody's working together to get out of there. It's going to be a migration out of there because there will be nothing to drink. So we're looking for those things. It's the lowest point in America. It's got floodwaters coming in, tidal. It's tidal. That's a big, huge thing, man. That's a lot of it, right? We got all that pressure coming from over, forcing it through soft rock, pushing it up inside the aquifer. There's all kinds of stuff going on here and factors at work that nobody's thinking about. But we're watching, and things are increasing exponentially as sea level rises. What does this mean? The highest points of the aquifer will be the very first target of these creatures. So, if you want to know where the first chaos will ensue, it's my opinion that you should see some migratory encounters once the aquifer is tainted, and it'll be from the south towards the north. The creatures are going to be trying to stay off people's radar, and that's the thing, right? Most of it is going to be out in those wilderness sections, and nobody's even going to notice. Some of this stuff, though, unfortunately, is around communities, and people are going to be seeing things. And some of the things that they're going to see and they're going to catch on film are going to shock the world, because when the creatures stand up and they're not in diffusion, it's going to look totally different and very weird. And a lot of stuff is going to be said, you know. I can just tell you that when the water goes, everything is going to be real quick. And so reports will be coming out, because as they're moving at whatever pace it is that they move at. So it could be a very slow one, and it may have already started. We don't know. But I do know this. When it hits this area, there's going to be some serious issues, man. This particular area has a lot of activity, Martin County, and some very serious issues going on where the buffer is concerned. It's just flat ground, and, you know, there really is no buffer. It's just like, you know, the creatures are like, we like where we're at, and we're not going anywhere. We are where we're at, and we're staying. And that's the way it looks. Or they wouldn't be feeding them there. You know what I'm saying? And that's the thing, man. You get into Martin County and you start getting into management. And that's the truth of it, because it's a serious issue. It's a very serious issue. Don't be a sheep. Be a goat.